Part 1. The Genesis of Fear. John Dawson was a man of dualities. By day, he was a respected psychologist, his practice a sanctuary for those in need of mental healing. His office was meticulously arranged, with shelves lined with books on human behavior and framed degrees attesting to his expertise. The soft hum of the air conditioner, the faint rustle of papers, and the gentle click of his pen were the only sounds that punctuated his sessions. His demeanor was calm and reassuring, a beacon of stability for his patients. But beneath this polished exterior lay a mind consumed by shadows. John's fascination with the human psyche extended far beyond the ethical boundaries of his profession. He was drawn to the darker aspects of the mind, those buried fears and desires that most people would rather leave unexamined. His research into the depths of human behavior often strayed into morally ambiguous territories. It was in these moments, alone in his dimly lit study, that John's true nature emerged. His childhood had been a crucible of trauma. Raised in a home where violence and neglect were the norm, John had learned early on to navigate the treacherous waters of psychological manipulation. His father's rages and his mother's emotional coldness had sculpted a young mind adept at hiding its true thoughts and feelings. The seeds of darkness planted in those formative years grew into a fascination with the human mind's capacity for both creation and destruction. John's approach to therapy was unconventional. He saw his patients not just as individuals in need of help, but as subjects in a grand experiment. His office, with its soothing decor and soft lighting, was a facade for his more insidious endeavors. His true experiments occurred in the shadows, where he probed the darkest recesses of his patients' minds, seeking to understand and, in some cases, exploit their vulnerabilities. One such experiment involved Elena, a young woman grappling with severe anxiety and depression. John had been treating her for months, carefully manipulating her sessions to elicit the most profound revelations about her fears and insecurities. It was under the guise of professional concern that John began to push the boundaries of his influence, testing how far he could go in manipulating her psyche. During their sessions, John observed Elena with an almost clinical detachment. He noted every tremor in her voice, every twitch of her eye, and every hesitant pause. He understood that her fears were a treasure trove of psychological data, but he also saw them as a means to an end, a way to satisfy his own burgeoning dark desires. One evening, as Elena left his office, John's gaze lingered on her retreating figure. He had been struck by a morbid curiosity. What would it be like to experience the fear that he so meticulously studied? His thoughts, once confined to theoretical musings, began to take on a darker form. What if he could orchestrate fear, not just observe it? The idea, once an idle fancy, now gnawed at him with unsettling intensity. The night was John's time. The quiet of his home, away from the scrutiny of colleagues and the pretense of his public life, provided the perfect backdrop for his darker inclinations. In his study, he kept a collection of items, photographs, notes, and mementos from his patients. These were not merely professional artifacts, but symbols of his power and control. The more he delved into his patients' lives, the more he felt a perverse sense of ownership over them. It was on one of these quiet nights that John made his first decision to act on his darkest impulses. His research had led him to a series of unsolved cases, a collection of disappearances and murders that had baffled authorities. John's fascination with these cases was not purely academic. He saw them as an opportunity to explore the boundaries of his own psychopathy. John meticulously planned his first act of violence. He selected a victim whose life seemed tragically ordinary, someone who would be missed but not mourned with the intensity that might draw unwanted attention. The thrill of the hunt, the precision of his planning, and the anticipation of the act itself consumed him. The night of his first murder, John's hands were steady as he carried out his plan. The victim, a young woman named Laura, was unsuspecting and alone. John's approach was methodical, his actions calculated. The psychological satisfaction he derived from the act was indescribable, a potent mix of power, control, and an unsettling sense of liberation. After the murder, John's return to his daily life was marked by a strange serenity. The facade of the caring psychologist was more intact than ever. He continued to engage with his patients and colleagues with the same calm demeanor, all the while reveling in the secret that only he knew. The murder had not only affirmed his darkest fantasies, but had also deepened his understanding of human fear. Yet, even as John reveled in his newfound power, a nagging sense of unease began to settle in. The thrill of the kill was addictive, but it came with its own set of psychological consequences. John's mind, once a labyrinth of controlled curiosity, now harbored a darkness that threatened to consume him. As the days passed, John's routine remained unchanged. He continued his practice, engaging in conversations that masked the turmoil brewing within him. His interactions with patients like Elena were now tinged with a new sense of predatory awareness. The thrill of his actions had not diminished. If anything, it had heightened his need to explore the darker corners of his psyche. In the quiet moments of reflection, John began to see himself as something more than a mere psychologist. He was a conductor of fear, orchestrating a symphony of terror that played out in the shadows of his mind. The lines between his professional and personal lives blurred, creating a dangerous fusion of reality and fantasy. The whispers in the dark were growing louder, echoing the internal conflict that John grappled with. The more he indulged in his darker inclinations, the more the boundaries of his mind began to unravel. The duality of his existence, the public persona of a respected professional and the hidden darkness of a murderer, was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. John Dawson was no longer just a psychologist, he was a man trapped in the shadows of his own making. As he continued his practice, the whispers of his past and the echoes of his crimes became inextricably linked, setting the stage for a journey into the abyss of his own creation. Chapter 2: The First Cut. John Dawson had always prided himself on his meticulous nature. Whether it was in his professional work as a psychologist or his secretive experiments, precision was his hallmark. However, nothing could have prepared him for the intense thrill and terror of his first murder. It was a new level of control and exhilaration that both fascinated and terrified him. The choice of his first victim was deliberate and calculated. John selected a woman named Laura Simmons, a 27-year-old waitress with a life that seemed tragically ordinary. Laura was someone who would be missed, but her disappearance wouldn't send ripples through the larger fabric of society. To John, she was an ideal candidate, a perfect blend of vulnerability and anonymity. John's preparations for the murder were extensive. He spent days researching Laura's routines, learning her habits and the places she frequented. He even visited the diner where she worked, under the guise of being a customer. His interactions with her were casual, designed to leave no impression and arouse no suspicion. To her, he was just another face in the crowd, but to him, she was a crucial element in his dark experiment. The night of the murder was an orchestration of chilling precision. John waited for the perfect moment, when Laura would be alone, her guard down. His plan was simple, yet effective: to strike when she was at her most vulnerable. He chose a quiet residential area for the abduction, a place that would allow him to move unnoticed. As Laura approached her apartment building, John was already in position. He had parked his car a few blocks away, blending in with the dimly lit streets. He watched her through the windshield, his mind racing with the possibilities of what was about to unfold. The anticipation was intoxicating, each second stretching into an eternity. When Laura finally entered her building, John followed her inside, maintaining a discreet distance. He waited until she reached her apartment door before making his move. With practiced stealth, he approached her, his heart pounding in his chest. The initial confrontation was swift. John had prepared for this moment with clinical detachment, but the reality was far more intense. Laura's fear was palpable. She realized too late the danger she was in, her screams muffled by John's firm grip. He had anticipated her resistance and had come prepared. The struggle was brief but violent, a chaotic dance that left both of them breathless. John's mind was a whirlwind of adrenaline and dark satisfaction as he subdued her. The act itself was brutal but methodical. John had chosen a location for the murder that was isolated but not too remote, a place where he could work efficiently while minimizing the risk of being disturbed. His movements were precise, each action carefully planned. The psychological aspect of the murder was as significant to him as the physical act itself. He wanted to understand and control every element of the process. When it was over, John's immediate feeling was not one of regret, but a perverse sense of accomplishment. The thrill of having orchestrated such a violent act was overwhelming. He felt an intense surge of power, a sense of dominance over not just his victim, but over the dark forces he had tapped into. The satisfaction was profound, but it came with an undercurrent of dread. John's next task was the disposal of the body. He had chosen a remote location, a disused warehouse on the outskirts of town. The warehouse was a place he had scouted in advance, a location that offered both seclusion and ease of access. The process of transporting Laura's body was methodical. John had prepared for every step, ensuring that he left no trace of his involvement. The act of cleaning up was almost as ritualistic as the murder itself. John took meticulous care to erase any signs of his presence, wiping down surfaces and removing any potential evidence. The satisfaction he derived from the thoroughness of his cleanup was almost as intense as the thrill of the kill. It was a demonstration of his control over every aspect of the crime. Returning to his everyday life, John wore a mask of normalcy that was almost effortless. He continued his work with the same professionalism and charm that had always defined him. To his colleagues and patients, he was the picture of composure. The murder was a secret he kept close, a dark satisfaction that he carried with him like a hidden trophy. The aftermath of the murder was a mix of excitement and anxiety. John reveled in the secrecy of his actions, but he was also acutely aware of the potential for mistakes. The thrill of the kill was tempered by the constant fear of being discovered. Every news report about the missing woman, every investigative inquiry was a reminder of the danger that lurked just beneath the surface. John's interactions with his patients took on a new dynamic. He found himself more observant, more aware of the subtleties of human behavior. His knowledge of fear and vulnerability deepened, enriching his understanding of the human psyche, but it also introduced a dangerous edge to his practice. He began to see his patients not just as individuals seeking help, but as potential subjects for his darker experiments. The psychological impact of his first murder was profound. John's mind was now a battleground of conflicting emotions: guilt, satisfaction, fear, and exhilaration. The lines between his professional and personal lives were becoming increasingly blurred. His ability to compartmentalize his actions was becoming more tenuous, and the thrill of his secret life was starting to seep into his everyday existence. John's growing paranoia was a constant companion. He found himself scanning news reports more frequently, searching for any mention of his activities. The sense of invincibility that had accompanied his first murder was gradually eroded by the realization of the risks involved. Every new piece of information about the investigation was both a challenge and a threat. Despite the growing anxiety, John's desire to continue his dark experimentations remained undiminished. The thrill of the kill had only deepened his fascination with the darker aspects of human nature. Each murder was not just an act of violence, but a profound exploration of the boundaries of fear and control. John's dual existence, his public persona as a respected psychologist and his private life as a killer, was becoming increasingly precarious. The thrill of his secret activities was counterbalanced by the ever-present fear of discovery. The psychological toll was significant, but the allure of his dark inclinations was irresistible. As John continued his practice, the shadows of his past and present actions began to merge. The whispers in the dark grew louder, echoing the internal conflict that was threatening to unravel his carefully constructed life. The boundaries between his public and private selves were dissolving, setting the stage for a confrontation with the darkness that had become an integral part of his existence. Chapter 3: Mask of Normalcy. John Dawson's life on the surface was a portrait of stability and respectability. By day, he was the epitome of professionalism, a distinguished psychologist whose practice was a refuge for many seeking solace from their mental anguish. His demeanor was calm, his interactions courteous, and his demeanor reassuring. He maintained a facade of normalcy so perfect that even his closest colleagues would have had difficulty imagining the darkness lurking beneath. John's office was designed to project warmth and trust. The walls were lined with shelves of books on psychology and self help, and the space was decorated with soothing colors and comfortable furniture. This environment was carefully curated to make his patients feel at ease, to disarm their defenses and allow them to open up. It was in this very space that John conducted his experiments, probing the depths of his patients' psyches while maintaining the guise of a caring professional. His colleagues at the clinic admired him. Dr. Henry Feldman, his closest friend and a fellow psychologist, often praised John's insight and dedication. "You have a gift, John," Henry would say, clapping him on the back. "Your ability to connect with people, to help them confront their fears, it's remarkable." John accepted these compliments with a modest smile, his mind racing with thoughts of his darker activities. He had developed a talent for compartmentalization, separating his professional persona from his private, more sinister inclinations. The skillful manipulation required to maintain this dual existence was a source of both challenge and satisfaction for him. One of his patients, Karen Mitchell, a young woman struggling with severe depression, was a particular focus for John. Her sessions had become a study in psychological vulnerability. John's approach was clinical, yet he knew how to present himself as empathetic and supportive. To her, he was a lifeline. To him, she was another subject in his ever-expanding research. Karen's sessions were intense. She spoke of her feelings of worthlessness and the recurring nightmares that plagued her. John listened intently, his mind racing as he analyzed her responses and behaviors. He used this information not just to help her, but to feed his growing obsession with understanding the limits of human fear and suffering. In contrast to the depth of his private life, John's interactions with Karen were marked by a professional detachment. He would nod sympathetically, offer therapeutic advice, and gently guide her through her emotional turmoil. Each session was a balancing act, a performance that allowed him to maintain his mask of normalcy. Detective Sarah Mitchell, a sharp and tenacious investigator, was also a part of John's daily life, though she was a more distant presence. Sarah was known for her dedication to solving cases and her unyielding determination to bring criminals to justice. Her reputation preceded her, and her involvement in high-profile cases had made her a local hero of sorts. John had met Sarah at a charity event some months earlier. They had engaged in polite conversation, discussing their respective fields with practiced ease. John had been intrigued by Sarah's unflinching focus on her work, admiring her commitment to uncovering the truth. Little did he know, Sarah's future investigations would inadvertently intersect with his own dark activities. John's interactions with Sarah were always courteous, yet there was an underlying tension that he carefully managed. He was aware of her reputation and the sharpness of her instincts. While their conversations were friendly and seemingly innocuous, John maintained a mental distance, aware that any slip-up could jeopardize his carefully constructed life. One evening, as John reviewed case notes and prepared for his next day of therapy sessions, he caught a glimpse of a news report about a new missing persons case. The case had been assigned to Sarah, who was now leading the investigation. John felt a shiver of apprehension, but he quickly masked his unease with a facade of casual interest. Sarah's case was a high-profile one, and her determination to solve it was palpable. The media coverage was extensive, and public interest was high. For John, this was both a challenge and a thrill. The knowledge that Sarah's investigation was drawing closer to his own dark world added an edge to his already heightened sense of paranoia. John's ability to blend into his daily life was a testament to his skill in maintaining his dual identity. He continued his professional activities with the same dedication and precision that had always characterized his work. Yet beneath the surface, he was constantly on edge, aware that any misstep could unravel his carefully maintained normalcy. During his free time, John immersed himself in his research and hobbies, further distancing himself from the darkness that lurked in his private life. He took long walks, engaged in gardening, and maintained a personal journal, activities that helped him preserve his outward appearance of normalcy. Each activity was a deliberate choice, designed to reinforce the image of a well-rounded, respectable individual. The dichotomy between John's public and private selves became more pronounced with each passing day. His days were filled with the routine of his professional life, while his nights were consumed by the thrill of his dark inclinations. Balancing these two worlds required an extraordinary degree of self-discipline and cunning. John's growing paranoia was a constant companion. The thrill of his secret activities was tempered by the ever-present fear of being discovered. He found himself constantly scrutinizing news reports, monitoring police activity, and analyzing every detail of the investigation into his crimes. The more Sarah pursued her case, the more John felt the pressure mounting. Despite his anxiety, John's ability to maintain his public facade remained unblemished. His colleagues and patients continued to see him as the consummate professional, a reliable source of support and guidance. His interactions with Sarah were cordial, but he remained vigilant, aware of the potential threat she posed to his carefully guarded secrets. John's dual existence was becoming increasingly precarious. The thrill of his dark activities was matched only by the constant fear of exposure. Each interaction, each decision, was a tightrope walk between his public persona and his hidden life. The tension between these two worlds was a source of both exhilaration and dread, setting the stage for a dangerous game of cat and mouse. As the investigation into the missing persons case continued, John's paranoia deepened. He became increasingly cautious, his every move calculated to avoid suspicion. The mask of normalcy he had so carefully crafted was under constant threat, and the stakes of his double life had never been higher. The lines between John's professional and personal lives were blurring, creating a dangerous intersection of reality and deception. His ability to maintain his facade of normalcy was becoming increasingly tenuous, but the allure of his dark inclinations was irresistible. As he continued to navigate the treacherous waters of his dual existence, the tension between his public and private selves reached a boiling point, setting the stage for the dramatic events to come. Chapter 4: The Collector's Trophy. John Dawson's fascination with the human psyche extended beyond his professional interests. It had evolved into a disturbing obsession with the tangible evidence of his darkest inclinations. Each murder he committed became not just an act of violence, but a ritualistic celebration of control and domination. His latest venture, collecting trophies from his victims, was a chilling testament to the depths of his depravity. The trophies were a central aspect of John's macabre collection. Each item was meticulously chosen, a physical embodiment of his conquests. His first trophy was a simple necklace, a delicate piece of jewelry that Laura Simmons had worn. John had taken it during the murder, carefully removing it from her neck as a symbol of his power. It was a small, seemingly inconsequential item, but to John, it was a token of his victory and an artifact of his twisted triumph. John's storage of these trophies was as methodical as the murders themselves. He had converted a section of his basement into a secret chamber, a hidden room behind a false wall. This space was a sanctum for his trophies, a place where he could examine and catalog his dark achievements. Each item was displayed with precision, arranged in a way that showcased the grotesque beauty of his collection. The room was dimly lit, illuminated only by a few strategically placed lamps. Shelves lined the walls, filled with an assortment of macabre artifacts. There were pieces of clothing, jewelry, and personal belongings, each carefully preserved and cataloged. John had developed a system for tracking his collection, noting the date of each murder and the specific details of the trophies he had taken. It was a chilling testament to his meticulous nature and his growing obsession with his dark work. John took great pride in his collection. He would often spend hours in the room, examining each trophy with a perverse sense of satisfaction. The process of collecting and cataloging his trophies had become a ritual in itself, a way for John to relive the thrill of the kill and reaffirm his dominance. He derived a twisted sense of fulfillment from his collection, a perverse pleasure in the tangible evidence of his control over his victims. The psychological impact of his actions was profound. John's trophies were more than just physical objects. They were symbols of his ability to inflict fear and exert control. Each item was a reminder of his power over life and death, a testament to the depths of his dark inclinations. The trophies were also a source of validation, reinforcing his sense of superiority and his belief in his own invincibility. The ritualistic nature of John's collection extended beyond the physical act of murder. He had developed a series of elaborate rituals that accompanied each killing. These rituals were designed to enhance his sense of control and dominance, to further distance himself from the humanity of his victims. Each murder was carefully planned and executed, with specific rituals that allowed John to derive maximum satisfaction from his actions. John's psychological state was increasingly influenced by his collection. The thrill of acquiring new trophies was matched only by the growing sense of paranoia and anxiety. The more trophies he collected, the more he felt the need to protect them. The room where he stored his trophies was a sanctuary, but it was also a place of growing tension and fear. John was acutely aware of the risks involved in maintaining his collection, but the allure of his dark achievements was too powerful to resist. The impact of John's actions on his victims was a central focus of his collection. Each trophy was a physical representation of the fear and suffering he had inflicted. John took a perverse pleasure in imagining the final moments of his victims, the terror and despair that had accompanied their deaths. The trophies were a way for him to relive these moments, to bask in the reflection of his own cruelty. As the investigation into the missing persons case continued, John's paranoia deepened. The media coverage and police scrutiny were constant reminders of the risks he faced. He was acutely aware that his trophies, if discovered, could lead to his undoing. The room where he kept his collection was a closely guarded secret, and John took every precaution to ensure that it remained hidden from prying eyes. Despite the risks, John's obsession with his collection only grew stronger. Each new trophy was a source of both excitement and anxiety. He continued to refine his rituals and expand his collection, driven by a compulsion that was as much psychological as it was physical. The trophies were a testament to his dark achievements, a perverse symbol of his dominance and control. John's interactions with his colleagues and patients continued with the same facade of normalcy. He maintained his professional demeanor, carefully concealing the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. His ability to compartmentalize his life was a testament to his skill in maintaining his dual identity. Yet the tension between his public persona and his hidden obsession was ever present, a constant reminder of the precariousness of his existence. The psychological impact of his trophies was significant. John's sense of invincibility was both a source of satisfaction and a breeding ground for paranoia. The more he collected, the more he felt the need to protect his secrets. The tension between his public and private lives reached a boiling point, setting the stage for a confrontation with the consequences of his actions. The room where John kept his trophies was a shrine to his darkest inclinations. It was a place of both pride and dread, a reflection of the depths of his depravity. As he continued to expand his collection, the line between his public and private selves grew increasingly blurred. The thrill of his dark achievements was matched only by the fear of discovery, creating a dangerous balance that was on the verge of collapse. John's fixation on his trophies was a symbol of his growing obsession with his dark work. The collection was a testament to his ability to inflict fear and exert control, a perverse reflection of his dominance over life and death. As he continued to refine his rituals and expand his collection, the tension between his public facade and his hidden life reached a critical juncture. The stakes of his double existence were higher than ever, setting the stage for the dramatic events to come. Chapter 5. The Hunt Begins. The discovery of a new murder in the city set off alarm bells for the police department, and Detective Sarah Mitchell was assigned the case. The victim, a young woman named Emily Parker, had been found in a secluded park, her body bearing signs of a brutal and calculated killing. The case quickly garnered media attention, with headlines splashed across newspapers and news channels reporting on the grisly details. Sarah's first encounter with the crime scene was a stark reminder of the brutality of the murders she was investigating. The park, usually a peaceful retreat for residents, had become a crime scene, a place of fear and horror. As Sarah surveyed the area, she couldn't shake the sense that this murder was different from others she had encountered. The meticulousness of the crime, the lack of apparent motive, and the chilling signature left at the scene all pointed to a killer who was both methodical and dangerously elusive. The initial forensic reports confirmed Sarah's suspicions. Emily Parker had been killed with a precision that suggested a deep psychological disturbance. The evidence pointed to a killer who took pleasure in his work, someone who derived satisfaction from the fear and suffering of his victims. The murder was part of a pattern that Sarah had seen before, but this case felt particularly personal and disturbing. The media frenzy surrounding the case was intense. News outlets speculated about the identity of the killer, fueling public fear and curiosity. Sarah was keenly aware of the pressure to solve the case quickly, but she was determined not to let the media hype cloud her judgment. She focused on the evidence and the details of the investigation, determined to uncover the truth behind the murder. As Sarah delved deeper into the case, she began to see patterns that connected this murder to others that had occurred over the past few months. Each victim had been killed in a similar fashion, with the same signature of brutality and control. The more Sarah examined the evidence, the more she became convinced that the killings were the work of a single, highly organized individual. John Dawson, meanwhile, was closely following the developments of the case. The media coverage of the murder and the ensuing investigation provided him with a constant stream of information about the progress of the case. John was both intrigued and apprehensive. He took meticulous care to cover his tracks and avoid leaving any evidence that could link him to the murders. The thrill of watching Sarah's investigation unfold was intoxicating for John. He reveled in the game of cat and mouse, delighting in the challenge of staying one step ahead of the authorities. John was acutely aware of the risks involved in his activities, but the satisfaction of manipulating and evading capture was too alluring to resist. As Sarah pieced together the clues and worked to build a profile of the killer, she encountered numerous obstacles. The killer was meticulous, leaving behind few clues and creating a sense of dread and confusion. The lack of motive and the randomness of the victims made the case particularly challenging. Sarah's determination to solve the case grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by the knowledge that a dangerous and unpredictable individual was on the loose. Sarah's investigation led her to explore various theories and suspects. She conducted interviews with witnesses, examined potential motives, and analyzed the evidence with a critical eye. Despite the setbacks and frustrations, Sarah remained steadfast in her pursuit of justice. She was determined to uncover the truth and bring the killer to account for his actions. The tension between Sarah and the killer continued to escalate. John's ability to remain hidden and manipulate the investigation was a source of both anxiety and excitement for him. He relished the challenge of outsmarting the authorities and enjoyed the psychological game of taunting Sarah from the shadows. John's interactions with his colleagues and patients remained unaffected by the investigation. He maintained his professional demeanor, continuing to perform his duties with the same dedication and precision as before. His dual life was becoming increasingly precarious, but John's ability to compartmentalize his activities allowed him to navigate the growing tension with relative ease. As Sarah's investigation progressed, she began to notice subtle connections between the murders. The pattern of the killings, the signature left at each crime scene, and the psychological profile of the killer all pointed to a singular individual. The sense of urgency and determination drove Sarah to push forward, even as the pressure from the media and the public mounted. John's growing paranoia was a constant companion. He was acutely aware of the increasing scrutiny and the potential risks associated with his activities. The thrill of evading capture was tempered by the constant fear of exposure. John took every precaution to avoid leaving any evidence that could link him to the murders, but the stakes of his double life had never been higher. The hunt for the killer had become a high-stakes game of strategy and deception. Sarah's relentless pursuit and John's meticulous evasion created a tense and dangerous dynamic. The investigation was not just a search for a murderer, but a battle of wits between two formidable opponents. As the case continued to unfold, Sarah's determination to solve the mystery grew stronger. She was driven by the need for justice and the desire to protect the community from a dangerous and elusive killer. John's fascination with the investigation and his ability to manipulate the situation only added to the complexity of the case. The hunt for the killer was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Sarah and John were locked in a dangerous game of cat and mouse, each trying to outsmart the other. The tension and suspense of the investigation created a sense of anticipation and uncertainty, setting the stage for the dramatic events to come. Chapter 6: Cat and Mouse. The investigation into the string of murders had reached a critical juncture. Detective Sarah Mitchell was increasingly convinced that she was dealing with a highly intelligent and calculating killer. The meticulous nature of the crimes and the deliberate patterns left behind were hallmarks of a mind that took pleasure in manipulating the authorities. As the case progressed, Sarah found herself in a dangerous game of cat and mouse with the elusive murderer. John Dawson, aware of the growing attention on his crimes, took deliberate measures to avoid detection. He reveled in the psychological challenge, viewing the police investigation as an intricate game. Each move Sarah made to track him felt like a personal challenge to John, who was determined to stay one step ahead. The thrill of the chase was intoxicating for him, amplifying his already dark inclinations. The cat and mouse dynamic between Sarah and John intensified with each passing day. John used every tool at his disposal to mislead and taunt the authorities. He carefully orchestrated his movements, ensuring that there were just enough clues to keep the investigation active, but not enough to pinpoint his exact location. The media coverage of the case provided him with a steady stream of information, which he used to gauge the progress of the investigation and adjust his strategies accordingly. Sarah's frustration mounted as she struggled to make headway in the case. Despite her best efforts, the killer seemed to always be one step ahead. The clues left behind were both tantalizing and misleading, creating a sense of confusion and disorientation. Sarah's team worked tirelessly to piece together the evidence, but the killer's ability to remain hidden and manipulate the investigation created an ever-present sense of urgency. One evening, Sarah reviewed the case files in her office, surrounded by piles of documents and photographs. She pored over the details of each murder, searching for patterns that might reveal the killer's identity. The more she examined the evidence, the more she became convinced that the murders were the work of someone with an intimate knowledge of psychology and human behavior. The killer's ability to choose victims and execute the murders with such precision suggested a deep understanding of fear and control. John, meanwhile, was enjoying the escalating tension. He had recently committed another murder, leaving behind a new set of clues that he hoped would further confound the investigation. The latest victim was a young woman named Jessica Harris, who had been killed in a manner that bore a striking resemblance to previous murders, but with a chilling new twist. John had taken care to leave a cryptic message at the crime scene, taunting the police with his intelligence and skill. The message was a deliberate challenge to Sarah, a puzzle that he hoped would frustrate and confound her. It read, "The mind is a labyrinth, and so is the soul. Find me if you can." The message was both enigmatic and provocative, reflecting John's belief in his own superiority and his ability to outwit the authorities. Sarah received the news of the latest murder with a mix of determination and frustration. The cryptic message was a direct challenge, and Sarah felt a renewed sense of urgency to solve the case. She knew that the killer was watching her every move, and the psychological warfare had become a central aspect of the investigation. The message served as a reminder of the killer's intelligence and the complexity of the case. As Sarah and her team analyzed the new evidence, they focused on deciphering the meaning behind the cryptic message. The investigation took on a new dimension, with the message serving as both a clue and a taunt. Sarah's team worked diligently to understand the significance of the message and how it might relate to the killer's patterns and motivations. John's enjoyment of the game was palpable. He took satisfaction in watching the police struggle with the clues he had left behind. Each piece of evidence he created was a deliberate effort to mislead and confuse. John reveled in the psychological impact of his actions, taking pleasure in the fear and frustration he was causing. The game of cat and mouse continued to escalate. Sarah's determination to solve the case was unwavering, but the killer's ability to stay hidden and manipulate the investigation created a sense of constant pressure. The psychological duel between Sarah and John became more intense, with each side trying to outsmart the other. The investigation began to take a toll on Sarah. The pressure to solve the case, combined with the psychological stress of dealing with a highly intelligent and dangerous killer, was beginning to affect her well-being. Sarah found herself increasingly consumed by the case, her personal life and relationships suffering as she devoted more and more time to the investigation. John, on the other hand, remained confident and composed. He continued to execute his plans with precision, taking calculated risks to maintain his advantage. The thrill of the chase was a driving force for him, fueling his dark desires and reinforcing his sense of control. As the investigation progressed, Sarah and her team made incremental progress. They identified potential links between the latest murder and previous cases, gradually narrowing down their list of suspects. The process was slow and painstaking, but Sarah remained committed to uncovering the truth. John's growing paranoia was a constant reminder of the risks involved. Despite his confidence, he was acutely aware of the potential for mistakes and the possibility of being discovered. He took every precaution to cover his tracks and avoid leaving any evidence that could lead to his capture. The cat-and-mouse game between Sarah and John reached a critical point. The investigation was becoming increasingly complex, with the killer's actions creating a sense of confusion and dread. The psychological warfare between Sarah and John was a central element of the case, driving both individuals to the edge of their limits. The stakes were higher than ever, and the tension between Sarah and John was palpable. Each side was determined to outsmart the other, creating a dangerous and high-stakes game of strategy and deception. The outcome of the investigation remained uncertain, but the intensity of the chase continued to build. As the case progressed, the psychological impact on both Sarah and John became more pronounced. The cat-and-mouse dynamic had become a central aspect of their lives, shaping their actions and decisions. The investigation was no longer just a search for a killer, but a battle of wits between two formidable opponents. Chapter 7. The Double Life. As the investigation into the string of murders continued to gain momentum, John Dawson found himself increasingly entangled in the complexities of his double life. By day, he was a respected psychologist at the top of his profession, revered by colleagues and patients alike. By night, however, he was a meticulous and remorseless serial killer, carefully orchestrating his crimes and evading capture. John's ability to maintain this dual existence was both a testament to his psychological prowess and a source of his deep-seated paranoia. His professional life demanded a facade of normalcy and competence, while his criminal activities required a level of secrecy and cunning that was becoming more difficult to sustain. In his clinical practice, John was known for his empathetic approach and insightful understanding of the human mind. His patients trusted him, and his colleagues respected his expertise. He had cultivated an image of professionalism and reliability, which served as the perfect cover for his more sinister activities. The contrast between his public persona and his private actions was stark and unsettling, but it was this very contrast that allowed him to operate with relative impunity. John's days were filled with patient sessions, consultations, and administrative duties. He was meticulous in his work, always maintaining a calm and composed demeanor. His interactions with patients were characterized by a deep understanding of their struggles and a genuine desire to help them. However, beneath the surface, John was constantly calculating. using his knowledge of psychology to manipulate and control his victims. The psychological strain of leading such a double life was beginning to take its toll on John. The constant need to compartmentalize his activities and maintain his facade was exhausting. The murders had become more frequent, and with each new victim, John found it increasingly difficult to manage the stress and paranoia associated with his criminal activities. John's interactions with his colleagues were marked by an air of casual professionalism. He participated in meetings, collaborated on research projects, and offered guidance to younger practitioners. His colleagues had no reason to suspect that he was hiding a dark secret. To them, John was the epitome of success and integrity, a fact that John used to his advantage. The strain of maintaining this double life became more apparent in John's personal moments of solitude. He would often find himself lost in thought, grappling with the weight of his actions and the constant fear of being discovered. The psychological impact of his crimes was profound, manifesting in nightmares, paranoia, and moments of introspection that revealed the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. Despite the mounting pressure, John continued to pursue his criminal activities with a meticulous and methodical approach. Each murder was carefully planned, each detail meticulously executed. He took great care to avoid leaving behind any trace that could lead to his identification. The thrill of evading capture and the satisfaction of executing his plans with precision drove him to continue his dark activities, despite the increasing difficulty of balancing his two lives. John's growing paranoia was evident in his daily routines. He became more cautious about his movements, scrutinizing every detail to ensure that he remained undetected. He was acutely aware of the risk of being discovered and took extreme measures to avoid drawing attention to himself. The fear of being caught was a constant companion, fueling his anxiety and making it difficult for him to relax. The psychological toll of leading a double life began to affect John's interactions with others. His behavior became more erratic, and his relationships with colleagues and patients became strained. The effort of maintaining his facade took a significant emotional and mental toll, leading to moments of withdrawal and detachment. The investigation led by Sarah Mitchell was a constant reminder of the risks John faced. The pressure to remain hidden and the need to outsmart the authorities weighed heavily on him. The psychological duel between John and Sarah became increasingly intense, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. John's ability to compartmentalize his life was tested repeatedly. He struggled to maintain his professional demeanor while dealing with the psychological strain of his criminal activities. The duality of his existence created a constant sense of tension and unease, making it difficult for him to find any sense of stability or peace. The more John engaged in his criminal activities, the more he became consumed by the psychological impact of his actions. The thrill of the chase and the satisfaction of evading capture were tempered by the growing weight of his conscience and the fear of being discovered. John's psychological state was becoming increasingly fragile, and the strain of maintaining his double life was pushing him to the brink. Despite the challenges, John remained determined to continue his activities. The psychological complexity of his crimes and the thrill of the chase provided a sense of purpose and control that he found difficult to relinquish. The duality of his existence was both a source of power and a burden, creating a complex and dangerous dynamic that drove his actions. The investigation into the murders continued to progress, with Sarah Mitchell and her team making incremental breakthroughs. The psychological profile of the killer was becoming clearer, and the links between the murders were becoming more apparent. Sarah's determination to solve the case was unwavering, despite the growing challenges and the mounting pressure. As the investigation continued, the psychological tension between John and Sarah reached new heights. The cat-and-mouse dynamic became increasingly intense, with each side pushing the other to the limits. The psychological complexity of the case was a reflection of the intricate and dangerous dance between the killer and the detective, creating a sense of anticipation and suspense that drove the narrative forward. John's ability to maintain his dual life was becoming more precarious, and the psychological toll of his actions was becoming more apparent. The strain of leading a double life was affecting his interactions, his mental state, and his overall sense of stability. Despite the challenges, John remained determined to continue his dark activities, driven by the thrill of the chase and the satisfaction of evading capture. The psychological impact of John's actions was becoming more pronounced, creating a sense of tension and unease that permeated every aspect of his life. The duality of his existence was a source of both power and vulnerability, shaping his actions and decisions as he navigated the dangerous and complex world of his double life. Chapter 8: A New Target. John Dawson had grown increasingly bold in his approach. His recent murder had pushed the boundaries of his usual patterns, and he now sought to make a more personal statement with his next crime. With the investigation closing in and Detective Sarah Mitchell's relentless pursuit becoming more effective, John decided it was time to send a clear, unsettling message. His new target would be someone close to Sarah, someone whose loss would not only impact her deeply, but also add a personal dimension to the case that could disrupt her focus. John's selection of his next victim was as deliberate as it was calculated. He meticulously chose Amanda Collins, a close friend of Sarah Mitchell, who had become a regular fixture in Sarah's personal life. Amanda was a well-liked social worker, known for her dedication to helping others and her friendly demeanor. Her proximity to Sarah made her an ideal target for John's plan, providing the emotional impact he sought to achieve. The planning for Amanda's murder was meticulous. John knew that Amanda's connection to Sarah would make the crime particularly devastating, and he wanted every detail to reflect his careful preparation and understanding of his victim's life. John spent weeks gathering information on Amanda's routine, habits, and personal connections. He learned about her favorite places, her schedule, and her daily routines. This information was crucial for John to execute his plan flawlessly and avoid leaving any trace that could lead back to him. John's approach was to stalk Amanda discreetly, blending into her environment without drawing attention. He observed her interactions, noting her vulnerabilities and the patterns in her life. The more he learned about her, the more he became aware of how significant her loss would be to Sarah. John's psychological profile of Sarah told him that a personal loss would create a significant emotional upheaval, potentially making her more vulnerable and less effective in the investigation. The night before the murder, John prepared his tools and laid out a plan that would ensure Amanda's death appeared as natural as possible. He knew that Sarah's emotional state would be a crucial factor in the aftermath of the crime, so he took great care in choosing a method that would amplify the emotional impact without immediately revealing his involvement. The murder had to be executed in a way that created confusion and made the investigation more complex. John's opportunity to strike came on a chilly autumn evening. Amanda was attending a charity event organized by her organization, which was held in a well-known community center. John, using the cover of the evening's events and a carefully planned disguise, managed to infiltrate the crowd unnoticed. He moved through the event with calculated precision, his presence blending seamlessly with the other attendees. As the night progressed, Amanda took a break from the event, stepping outside to get some fresh air. John, having anticipated this, followed her discreetly, ensuring he stayed out of sight. He watched as Amanda leaned against a railing, enjoying the crisp evening air, completely unaware of the danger that was closing in on her. John's heart raced with anticipation, the thrill of the hunt heightened by the knowledge that he was about to deliver a devastating blow to Sarah. The attack was swift and brutal. John approached Amanda from behind, using a method that would leave minimal evidence and ensure that the murder was attributed to natural causes. He acted with precision, his movements driven by a cold, calculated resolve. The details of the attack were executed with the same meticulous care that characterized his previous crimes, leaving no immediate clues that could link the murder to him. John's satisfaction with the execution of the crime was palpable. He knew that the psychological impact on Sarah would be profound, and he relished the thought of the detective's emotional turmoil. The murder of Amanda was not just a statement, but a deliberate act of psychological warfare. John wanted Sarah to feel the full weight of his manipulations, to experience the fear and helplessness that he so thoroughly enjoyed inflicting. The next morning, Sarah received the devastating news of Amanda's death. The shock and grief that followed were palpable, and Sarah's reaction was a mix of disbelief and anguish. The murder was reported as an unfortunate accident, but the impact on Sarah was immediate and profound. The loss of her close friend threw her into a state of emotional chaos, making it difficult for her to focus on the investigation. Sarah's personal grief began to intersect with her professional responsibilities. The emotional turmoil she experienced as a result of Amanda's death had a noticeable impact on her ability to lead the investigation. Her colleagues observed the shift in her demeanor, and while they offered their support, they also sensed the deep emotional strain that was affecting her judgment and focus. As Sarah grappled with her grief, John watched from the shadows, pleased with the disruption he had caused. He had anticipated that Amanda's death would create a significant emotional impact, and the evidence of Sarah's struggle to cope with the loss was a testament to the effectiveness of his plan. John's ability to manipulate and control the situation was a source of dark satisfaction, reinforcing his belief in his own superiority. The investigation into Amanda's murder became intertwined with the ongoing pursuit of the serial killer. Sarah's personal connection to the victim made the case even more personal, and the search for answers took on a new dimension. The emotional toll of the case was evident in Sarah's interactions with her team, as she struggled to balance her grief with her professional duties. John's actions had created a complex and challenging situation for Sarah. The murder of Amanda had not only deepened the personal stakes for the detective, but had also added a new layer of psychological complexity to the case. John's manipulation of the investigation continued, with each new development serving to highlight his ability to remain hidden and control the narrative. As Sarah worked through her grief and the complexities of the investigation, the case became more than just a search for a killer. It was a battle against an adversary who had proven to be both cunning and ruthless. The psychological impact of Amanda's death was a constant reminder of the stakes involved, and Sarah's determination to bring the killer to justice was fueled by both her personal loss and her professional commitment. The investigation continued, with Sarah and her team working tirelessly to uncover the truth behind Amanda's murder and its connection to the broader series of crimes. John remained a step ahead, his ability to manipulate and control the situation, providing him with a sense of power and satisfaction. The game of cat and mouse had reached a new level of intensity, with the emotional stakes higher than ever before. Chapter 9: The Breaking Point. Detective Sarah Mitchell found herself teetering on the edge of collapse. The murder of her close friend Amanda Collins had rocked her world, adding an emotional weight that was proving difficult to bear. The murder investigation had transitioned from a professional obligation to a deeply personal quest for justice, and the strain was evident in every aspect of her life. The office was a whirlwind of activity. The team worked tirelessly, fueled by caffeine and determination, but the pressure was beginning to show. The murder had sent shockwaves through the department, and the urgency to solve the case was palpable. Sarah's colleagues were supportive, but the gravity of her personal connection to the case made it difficult for them to fully understand her emotional state. Sarah's days were filled with meetings, briefings, and late-night shifts. She poured herself into the investigation, driven by a need to make sense of the chaos and find closure. Yet, despite her best efforts, the case was proving to be a labyrinth of frustration and confusion. The emotional toll of Amanda's death, compounded by the relentless pursuit of the killer, was starting to unravel Sarah's resolve. At home, the emotional impact of the case was no less severe. Sarah struggled to find solace in her personal life, with the shadow of Amanda's death looming over her. The grief she felt was profound, and it was beginning to seep into her interactions with family and friends. The once clear boundaries between her professional and personal lives had blurred, creating a constant state of turmoil. Sarah's frustration was magnified by the growing realization that the killer was always one step ahead. The meticulous nature of the murders and the lack of solid leads made the case increasingly difficult. The killer's ability to evade capture and manipulate the investigation was becoming more apparent, and it was clear that the psychological game was far from over. The breaking point for Sarah came during a particularly grueling day. She had spent hours poring over evidence, trying to find connections and patterns that might lead to a breakthrough. The mounting pressure and the relentless demands of the case had left her emotionally and physically drained. The stress of balancing her grief with her professional responsibilities was taking a toll on her well-being. The culmination of her frustration occurred during a team meeting, where Sarah's emotions boiled over. The discussion had become a repetitive cycle of speculation and dead ends, and Sarah's patience was wearing thin. Her colleagues, aware of her personal connection to the case, attempted to offer support, but Sarah's mounting frustration made it difficult for her to maintain her composure. In a moment of raw emotion, Sarah expressed her frustration with the investigation. Her voice cracked as she vented her feelings of helplessness and anger. The room fell silent, and Sarah's colleagues exchanged concerned glances. It was clear that the emotional strain of the case had reached a breaking point, and the toll it was taking on Sarah was becoming increasingly evident. After the meeting, Sarah took a moment to collect herself. She found solace in a quiet corner of the precinct, trying to regain her composure and focus. The weight of Amanda's death and the pressure of the investigation were overwhelming, and Sarah struggled to reconcile her personal grief with her professional responsibilities. The incident served as a wake-up call for Sarah. She realized that her emotional state was affecting her ability to lead the investigation effectively. The personal connection to the case had created a significant emotional barrier, making it difficult for her to maintain the clarity and objectivity needed to solve the crime. In the days that followed, Sarah made a concerted effort to regain her focus. She sought support from her colleagues, who were understanding of her situation, and offered their assistance in managing the emotional toll of the case. The team rallied around her, providing both professional and personal support as she worked to navigate the challenges she faced. Sarah's renewed determination was evident in her approach to the investigation. She worked closely with her team, analyzing evidence, following leads, and reevaluating the case with a fresh perspective. The support of her colleagues and the understanding of her emotional state allowed her to approach the investigation with a renewed sense of purpose. The investigation began to show signs of progress. The team made incremental breakthroughs, uncovering new leads and connections that had previously eluded them. Sarah's renewed focus and determination played a crucial role in these developments, and her colleagues recognized the importance of her leadership in moving the case forward. Despite the progress, Sarah was acutely aware of the psychological toll the investigation had taken on her. The emotional scars of Amanda's death remained, and the personal impact of the case was something she would need to address in time. The journey to justice was far from over, and Sarah knew that the road ahead would be challenging. As the investigation continued, Sarah remained committed to solving the case and bringing Amanda's killer to justice. The breaking point had been a moment of intense personal and professional struggle, but it also served as a turning point. Sarah's resilience and determination in the face of adversity were a testament to her commitment to her work and to the memory of her friend. The case, now more personal than ever, continued to unfold with new developments and challenges. Sarah's journey was a complex blend of grief, determination, and professional commitment. The investigation had become more than just a search for a killer. It was a quest for closure and a testament to the strength and resolve of a dedicated detective. Chapter 10. The Past Unveiled. The murky depths of John Dawson's psyche were about to be revealed. As Detective Sarah Mitchell and her team delved deeper into the investigation, they began to uncover pieces of John's past that shed light on his twisted motivations and dark tendencies. The revelations were both chilling and illuminating. offering a glimpse into the events that shaped John into the monster he had become. Sarah's efforts to connect the dots in the investigation led her to explore John's background more thoroughly. She knew that understanding the killer's past could provide crucial insights into his motives and methods. With the support of her team, she initiated a comprehensive background check on John Dawson, uncovering records and personal history that had been meticulously hidden. The first significant breakthrough came when Sarah's team discovered an old newspaper article detailing a series of incidents from John's childhood. The article mentioned a troubled upbringing, marked by abusive parents and a series of traumatic events that had left lasting scars on young John. The article provided a glimpse into a life marred by violence and neglect, setting the stage for the psychological torment that would later manifest in his adult life. Sarah's investigation revealed that John had grown up in a turbulent environment. His father was a violent alcoholic, and his mother was emotionally detached, leaving John to fend for himself in a world filled with chaos and abuse. The trauma of his early years had created a breeding ground for the psychological issues that would later drive him to commit heinous crimes. The investigation into John's past also uncovered a series of incidents involving violent outbursts and erratic behavior during his teenage years. There were reports of confrontations with peers and a growing sense of isolation that had characterized John's adolescence. These incidents painted a picture of a young man struggling with deep-seated anger and a sense of detachment from society. Sarah's team also discovered that John had a history of engaging in manipulative and controlling behavior. Records from his time in college revealed a pattern of behavior that included deceitful tactics and a penchant for psychological manipulation. John's academic success had been accompanied by a trail of broken relationships and failed friendships, all attributed to his increasingly erratic and controlling tendencies. As Sarah and her team continued to dig into John's past, they uncovered a disturbing pattern of behavior that aligned with his current actions. The psychological profile that emerged from the investigation revealed a man who had never truly dealt with his past traumas. Instead, he had channeled his unresolved issues into a series of violent and calculated acts, using his intelligence and psychological acumen to manipulate and control those around him. The most shocking discovery was a series of journal entries and personal writings that John had kept over the years. These writings offered a glimpse into his disturbed mind, revealing a fascination with death and control. The entries detailed John's growing obsession with his own darkness and his desire to exert power over others. The writings were a chilling testament to the twisted thoughts that had fueled his transformation into a serial killer. The emotional impact of these revelations on Sarah was profound. As she pieced together John's past, she began to understand the full extent of the psychological torment that had shaped his actions. The insight into his childhood and the traumas he had endured provided a context for his behavior, but it also reinforced the horror of his crimes. Sarah's growing understanding of John's motivations did little to alleviate the emotional weight of the case. The knowledge that John's past had been marked by such intense suffering only added to the complexity of the investigation. Sarah was faced with the difficult task of reconciling the human elements of John's past with the monstrous nature of his current actions. The team's investigation into John's past also led to interviews with former acquaintances and colleagues who had known him at various points in his life. These interviews provided additional insights into John's behavior and personality, painting a more complete picture of the man behind the murders. The accounts of those who had interacted with John offered a glimpse into his manipulative and controlling tendencies, adding depth to the psychological profile being developed. As Sarah and her team sifted through the information, they began to see connections between John's past experiences and his current behavior. The patterns of violence, control, and manipulation that characterized his adult life were rooted in the traumas of his childhood. The revelations were both disturbing and illuminating, offering valuable insights into the mind of a killer. The investigation into John's past also highlighted the role of his psychological profile in the ongoing case. The team's understanding of John's motivations and behaviors informed their approach to the investigation, providing them with new strategies for tracking him down and predicting his next moves. The insights gained from John's past were instrumental in shaping the next steps in the pursuit of justice. Sarah's personal reaction to the revelations was a mix of empathy and revulsion. She found herself grappling with the duality of understanding John's past while condemning his present actions. The psychological complexity of the case had reached new heights, and Sarah was determined to navigate the challenges with both compassion and resolve. As the investigation continued, the focus shifted to leveraging the knowledge of John's past to bring him to justice. The team worked tirelessly to piece together the final elements of the case, using their insights into his behavior and motivations to anticipate his next moves. The pursuit of John Dawson had become a battle of wits and determination, with the ultimate goal of ending his reign of terror. The revelations about John's past were a crucial turning point in the investigation. They provided the team with the understanding needed to unravel the complexities of his behavior and ultimately bring him to justice. The journey through John's past was a sobering reminder of the deep-seated issues that could drive a person to commit unimaginable acts, and it fueled Sarah's determination to see the case through to its conclusion. Chapter 11. The Web Tightens. The investigation into John Dawson's crimes had reached a critical juncture. With the revelations from his past providing crucial insights, Detective Sarah Mitchell and her team were now focusing on narrowing down their list of suspects and identifying the killer with increasing precision. The web of clues was tightening, and every piece of evidence brought them closer to capturing the elusive predator. The breakthrough in understanding John's psychological profile had led to a more focused approach. Sarah and her team meticulously analyzed every aspect of the case, cross-referencing evidence and exploring connections that had previously been overlooked. The knowledge of John's past allowed them to anticipate his behavior and predict his next moves with greater accuracy. One of the key developments in the investigation was the identification of potential suspects who fit the psychological profile of the killer. The team reviewed records of individuals with similar traits and backgrounds to John Dawson, looking for any connections to the murders. Each potential suspect was carefully examined, and their alibis and histories were scrutinized. Sarah's team also revisited the crime scenes, reevaluating the evidence with their newfound understanding of John's motivations and methods. They paid particular attention to patterns and details that might have been missed in the initial investigation. The process was exhaustive, but it was essential to ensure that no crucial information was overlooked. The team's efforts led to the discovery of a series of significant clues that connected John Dawson to the murders. Surveillance footage from nearby areas, witness testimonies, and forensic evidence began to paint a clearer picture of John's movements and activities leading up to the crimes. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and the investigation was gaining momentum. As the investigation progressed, Sarah's team identified several key pieces of evidence that pointed directly to John. One of the most crucial discoveries was a series of phone records that revealed John's frequent communication with individuals connected to the victims. The records provided a clear link between John and the people who had been targeted, solidifying the connection between him and the murders. In addition to the phone records, forensic analysis of the crime scenes yielded new information. DNA evidence, previously inconclusive, was re-examined and matched to samples taken from John. The confirmation of John's DNA at the scenes was a critical breakthrough, providing tangible proof of his involvement in the crimes. Despite these significant developments, the investigation was not without its challenges. John Dawson remained elusive, and the team faced constant pressure to capture him before he could strike again. The psychological game that John had been playing with the authorities continued, and he seemed to revel in the chase. Sarah's determination to bring John to justice was unwavering. She worked closely with her team, coordinating efforts and strategizing their approach. The investigation had become a high-stakes race against time, and Sarah was resolute in her mission to end John's reign of terror. As the team closed in on John, they began to develop a detailed plan for his capture. They analyzed his patterns and behaviors, using their understanding of his psychological profile to anticipate his next move. The plan involved a coordinated effort to apprehend him while minimizing the risk to the public and ensuring that he would not slip through their grasp. The pressure on Sarah and her team was immense. The knowledge that they were on the brink of capturing a dangerous killer only added to the intensity of the situation. The team worked around the clock, tracking leads and preparing for the final confrontation with John Dawson. The investigation reached a pivotal moment when the team received a tip about John's whereabouts. A reliable informant had provided information about a location where John was believed to be hiding. The tip was corroborated by surveillance footage and other evidence, leading the team to believe that they were closing in on their target. Sarah and her team prepared for the operation with meticulous precision. They conducted a thorough briefing, outlining the details of the plan and assigning roles to each team member. The goal was to apprehend John without giving him an opportunity to escape or harm anyone in the process. The operation was set in motion, and the team moved in to execute the plan. The tension was palpable as they approached the location where John was believed to be hiding. Every detail was critical, and the team remained focused on their objective. As the operation unfolded, Sarah's heart raced with anticipation. The stakes were high, and the success of the mission depended on the team's ability to execute their plan flawlessly. The moments leading up to the confrontation were filled with a sense of urgency and determination. The team's efforts paid off as they successfully apprehended John Dawson. The arrest was a dramatic and intense moment, marked by the culmination of investigation and pursuit. John was taken into custody, and the team breathed a collective sigh of relief as the dangerous killer was finally behind bars. The arrest of John Dawson was a significant achievement, but it was only the beginning of a new phase in the investigation. The focus now shifted to preparing for the trial and ensuring that justice would be served. The work of Sarah and her team had brought them closer to resolving the case, but the journey was far from over. The web had indeed tightened, and the capture of John Dawson marked a crucial turning point in the quest for justice. The investigation had been a relentless pursuit, driven by the determination to bring a dangerous predator to account for his crimes. As the case moved forward, Sarah remained committed to seeing it through to its conclusion, ensuring that John would face the full consequences of his actions. Chapter 12. A Deadly Dance. The arrest of John Dawson was just the beginning of a new and perilous chapter in the investigation. With the serial killer in custody, Detective Sarah Mitchell faced the complex and grueling task of preparing for the trial. The psychological battle between Sarah and John was far from over, and the deadly dance between hunter and prey continued as the case entered the judicial phase. The media frenzy surrounding John's arrest was relentless. The public was captivated by the story of the serial killer who had eluded capture for so long, and every detail of the case was scrutinized. Sarah and her team found themselves at the center of intense media coverage, which added an additional layer of pressure to their work. Sarah's primary focus now was to build a solid case against John Dawson. The prosecution team worked tirelessly to gather evidence and prepare for the trial. The process involved meticulously reviewing every piece of evidence, including forensic analysis, witness testimonies, and John's confessions. The goal was to ensure that the case against him was airtight and that justice would be served. John, however, was not about to make things easy. From the moment of his arrest, he had shown an alarming degree of cunning and manipulation. In custody, he maintained a facade of calm and control, often taunting Sarah and her team with his cryptic comments and unsettling behavior. His psychological game continued, and he seemed to take pleasure in the mental torment he inflicted on his pursuers. Sarah knew that John's psychological prowess was a formidable weapon. She had to remain vigilant and strategic in her approach. The process of preparing for the trial involved not only gathering evidence, but also understanding John's manipulative tactics and anticipating his attempts to undermine the case. The pretrial hearings were intense and fraught with tension. John's defense team mounted a vigorous challenge, questioning the validity of the evidence and attempting to discredit the prosecution's case. The defense's strategy was to create doubt and cast uncertainty on the prosecution's claims. John's manipulative behavior extended to the courtroom, where he seemed to relish the opportunity to play mind games with everyone involved. During the hearings, Sarah found herself constantly on edge. The psychological battle with John was wearing her down, and she had to maintain her focus and composure. She spent long hours reviewing case materials, preparing for cross-examinations, and strategizing with the prosecution team. The pressure to secure a conviction was immense, and every detail mattered. As the trial approached, Sarah and her team faced additional challenges. John's defense team sought to delay the proceedings and create obstacles at every turn. They filed motions to suppress evidence, challenged witness testimonies, and attempted to exploit any procedural errors. The legal maneuvers were designed to weaken the prosecution's case and buy time for their client. The courtroom drama reached a fever pitch as the trial began. John Dawson's presence was a constant reminder of the horrors he had inflicted on his victims. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, and the families of the victims were present, their faces etched with grief and hope. Sarah felt a deep sense of responsibility to ensure that justice was served for the victims and their families. The trial featured a series of compelling testimonies and evidence presentations. Forensic experts provided detailed accounts of the evidence linking John to the crimes, while witnesses recounted the impact of his actions on their lives. The prosecution presented a strong case, but the defense was equally relentless in their attempts to undermine the narrative. Throughout the trial, John's behavior remained unsettlingly calm. He appeared unfazed by the proceedings and continued to play mind games with Sarah and the courtroom. His demeanor was a calculated display of arrogance and control, designed to provoke and unsettle those around him. One of the most critical moments in the trial was John's own testimony. He took the stand and provided a chilling account of his crimes, describing them with a disturbing detachment. His confession was a stark reminder of the cold and calculating nature of his actions. The testimony was both haunting and revealing, offering insight into John's twisted mindset. Sarah watched with a mix of revulsion and determination as John spoke. She knew that every word he uttered was part of his manipulative strategy, designed to provoke a reaction and sow seeds of doubt. Despite the psychological toll, Sarah remained focused on her goal of securing a conviction and bringing closure to the victims and their families. The trial drew to a close with closing arguments from both sides. The prosecution emphasized the overwhelming evidence and the psychological profile of John Dawson, while the defense sought to cast doubt on the reliability of the evidence and the integrity of the investigation. The final arguments were a dramatic culmination of the courtroom battle, and the outcome hinged on the jury's decision. As the jury deliberated, Sarah experienced a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The verdict would determine not only John's fate, but also the resolution of a case that had consumed her for months. She reflected on the journey from the initial investigation to the courtroom, recognizing the immense effort and dedication that had gone into pursuing justice. The verdict was delivered with palpable tension in the courtroom. John Dawson was found guilty on all charges, and the sense of relief was overwhelming. The verdict marked a significant milestone in the pursuit of justice, and Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The aftermath of the trial was a time of reflection and recovery. The case had taken a toll on everyone involved, and Sarah and her team took time to process the experience. The closure of the case brought a measure of solace to the victims' families and provided a sense of justice for the horrors they had endured. The deadly dance between Sarah and John had come to an end, but the impact of the case would be felt for years to come. The psychological battle had been intense and challenging, but the successful prosecution of John Dawson was a testament to the resilience and determination of those who sought justice. As Sarah moved forward, she carried with her the lessons learned and the resolve to continue fighting for justice in the face of adversity. Chapter 13. The Silent Stalker. With John Dawson convicted and awaiting sentencing, the case seemed to be drawing to a close. However, Sarah Mitchell found herself facing a new and unexpected challenge. Despite the relative calm of the post-trial period, a sense of unease lingered. Unsettling events and strange occurrences hinted that the nightmare might not be over. Sarah's life outside of the case had been a whirlwind of media attention and public scrutiny. Her every move was closely followed, and the pressure to maintain a sense of normalcy was immense. The trial had brought some measure of justice, but it had also left a trail of emotional scars. Sarah struggled to balance her professional responsibilities with her personal well-being. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, Sarah returned home to find her apartment in disarray. Items were strewn about, and it was clear that someone had been inside. A chill ran down her spine as she realized that the disturbance was not just a random burglary, it was an unsettling reminder of the danger that still lurked. Sarah's initial reaction was to contact the police and file a report. The investigating officers examined her apartment for evidence and took her statement. Despite their assurances, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a simple break-in. The familiarity of the intrusion felt eerily personal. As days passed, Sarah began receiving anonymous letters and phone calls. The messages were cryptic and taunting, echoing John Dawson's manipulative tactics during the trial. The contents of the letters and the tone of the calls suggested that someone was watching her every move, reveling in the fear they instilled. The nature of the threats was disturbing. The letters contained unsettling details about Sarah's daily routine and personal life, indicating that the sender had been closely observing her. The phone calls were filled with eerie silence or distorted voices, adding to the sense of paranoia. The combination of these elements made Sarah's anxiety palpable. Despite her fear, Sarah remained determined to uncover the source of the threats. She enlisted the help of her colleagues and worked with the police to investigate the anonymous messages and track down the caller. The investigation revealed no immediate leads or suspects, but Sarah was resolute in her quest to identify the stalker. As Sarah delved deeper into the investigation, she noticed patterns in the messages and calls. The contents seemed to reflect John Dawson's psychological profile, suggesting that the stalker might be connected to him in some way. Sarah's suspicions grew as she considered the possibility that John's manipulative influence extended beyond the courtroom. The psychological impact of the stalking was profound. Sarah found it increasingly difficult to differentiate between reality and the psychological games being played on her. The sense of being watched and the constant fear began to take a toll on her mental health. The support from her colleagues and loved ones was crucial in helping her cope with the mounting stress. The investigation continued, and Sarah's team made some progress. They were able to trace the phone calls to a series of burner phones, which provided a partial lead. However, the lack of concrete evidence made it challenging to identify the person responsible. The anonymous letters, while disturbing, also lacked clear clues. As Sarah worked tirelessly to unravel the mystery, she found herself drawn into a new and dangerous game. The stalker seemed to anticipate her every move, staying one step ahead in the psychological warfare. The constant tension and fear created a sense of paranoia that was difficult to escape. In a pivotal moment, Sarah received a letter with a new and chilling message. The letter contained a photograph of her in a vulnerable moment, clearly taken without her knowledge. The photo was accompanied by a note that read, "You thought it was over. The dance continues." The realization that the stalker had been monitoring her so closely was deeply unsettling. Sarah's resolve to uncover the truth grew stronger, and she intensified her efforts to identify the stalker. The investigation became a personal mission, driven by the need to reclaim her sense of safety and control. Amidst the turmoil, Sarah discovered a crucial lead. A detailed analysis of the letters and phone calls revealed a connection to a local support group for victims of violent crime. The group had been frequented by individuals with a history of trauma and psychological issues, and Sarah found a potential link between the group and the stalker's behavior. The investigation led Sarah to a former member of the support group, a person with a troubled past and a deep-seated obsession with the case. The individual had exhibited signs of mental instability and had shown a particular interest in Sarah's work. The connection to the support group provided a possible motive and a pathway to identifying the stalker. With the new lead in hand, Sarah and her team conducted a thorough investigation into the individual's background and activities. They uncovered evidence that linked the person to the anonymous messages and phone calls. The connection was solidified, and the stalker was identified as someone with a personal vendetta and a desire to continue the psychological torment. The arrest of the stalker brought a measure of relief and closure to Sarah. The individual's motivations were revealed to be a combination of obsession, jealousy, and a desire for recognition. The psychological profile mirrored the traits of those who had been influenced by John Dawson's manipulative tactics. The resolution of the stalking case allowed Sarah to begin the process of healing and recovery. The support of her colleagues, friends, and family played a crucial role in helping her regain a sense of normalcy. The experience had been a harrowing reminder of the psychological impact of her work, but it also reinforced her commitment to seeking justice for others. As Sarah moved forward, she reflected on the lessons learned from the ordeal. The experience had deepened her understanding of the psychological complexities involved in criminal investigations and had strengthened her resolve to confront the challenges of her profession. The Silent Stalker had been a formidable adversary, but Sarah's perseverance and determination had ultimately prevailed. The chapter of the stalking case closed, but the impact of the experience lingered. Sarah emerged from the ordeal with a renewed sense of purpose and a greater appreciation for the support and resilience of those around her. The journey through the deadly dance with John Dawson and the subsequent stalking case had left an indelible mark on her life, shaping her future endeavors and commitment to justice. Chapter 14: The Echoes of Madness. The resolution of the stalking case brought a temporary respite, but the echoes of John Dawson's madness continued to reverberate in Sarah Mitchell's life. The psychological toll of the case had left her grappling with profound emotional and mental challenges. Despite her outward composure, the internal struggle was relentless. Sarah's daily routine was now marked by a constant effort to manage her anxiety and the lingering trauma from her experiences. The emotional scars from the case were not easily healed, and she found herself haunted by recurring nightmares and flashbacks. The intensity of the psychological battle with John Dawson had left a deep imprint on her psyche. In the aftermath of the trial and the stalking case, Sarah sought therapy to address her mental health struggles. The sessions provided a safe space to confront her fears and anxieties, allowing her to process the trauma and begin the journey toward healing. The therapeutic process was challenging but necessary for her emotional well-being. As Sarah navigated her path to recovery, she also found solace in reconnecting with her personal life. Spending time with friends and family offered moments of respite from the relentless strain of her work. The support from her loved ones was invaluable in helping her regain a sense of normalcy and balance. Despite the progress in her personal life, Sarah remained deeply affected by the psychological impact of the case. The nature of John Dawson's crimes and the subsequent stalking had exposed her to the darkest aspects of human nature. The experience had left her with a heightened awareness of the fragility of the human mind and the enduring effects of trauma. John Dawson's legacy continued to cast a long shadow over Sarah's life. The memories of the case and the chilling nature of Dawson's manipulative tactics were difficult to escape. Sarah grappled with the realization that the echoes of madness would likely be a part of her for years to come. The case had also left a mark on the broader community. The media coverage and public interest in the trial had sparked conversations about the psychological impact of crime and the importance of mental health support for those affected by traumatic events. Sarah became an advocate for mental health awareness, using her experiences to raise awareness and support for others facing similar challenges. In addition to her advocacy work, Sarah continued to be involved in her professional duties. She took on new cases and challenges, but the shadow of John Dawson's madness remained a constant reminder of the psychological complexities of her work. The experience had deepened her understanding of the human mind and the toll that violence and trauma could take. Sarah's journey of healing was marked by periods of reflection and introspection. She sought to make sense of her experiences and find meaning in the aftermath of the case. The process involved confronting her own vulnerabilities and fears, as well as seeking out sources of strength and resilience. One of the significant milestones in Sarah's recovery was her decision to share her story publicly. She spoke at conferences and events about the psychological impact of her work and the importance of mental health support. Her willingness to open up about her experiences provided a powerful message of hope and resilience for others facing similar challenges. The echoes of madness were a reminder of the profound impact that criminal cases could have on those involved. Sarah's journey was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the capacity for recovery, even in the face of the darkest experiences. The process of healing was ongoing, but Sarah remained determined to move forward and continue her work with a renewed sense of purpose. As Sarah looked toward the future, she was mindful of the lessons learned from her experiences. The case had reinforced her commitment to seeking justice and supporting those affected by trauma. The echoes of madness would always be a part of her, but they also served as a reminder of her resilience and the importance of confronting the darkness with courage and hope. The chapter of her life marked by John Dawson's crimes and the subsequent stalking case had been a harrowing journey, but it had also been a catalyst for growth and transformation. Sarah emerged from the experience with a deeper understanding of the complexities of the human mind and a renewed dedication to her work and advocacy. As she continued her path of recovery and advocacy, Sarah found solace in the knowledge that her experiences had contributed to a greater awareness of the psychological impact of crime. The echoes of madness, though challenging, had become a source of strength and resilience as she forged ahead with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment to making a positive difference in the world. Chapter 15. The Trap is Set. As Sarah Mitchell delved deeper into the investigation of John Dawson's crimes and the ensuing stalking case, the idea of setting a trap for the elusive fugitive took shape. Despite the resolution of the stalking case, John's continued evasion of capture had become a pressing concern. Sarah's determination to bring him to justice remained unwavering. The challenge was formidable. John Dawson, now a fugitive, was a master of psychological manipulation and had demonstrated an uncanny ability to remain elusive. The complexities of his criminal mind and his understanding of the psychological tactics used by law enforcement made him a particularly dangerous adversary. Sarah knew that any attempt to capture him would require meticulous planning and a deep understanding of his behavior. Sarah convened a series of strategy meetings with her team to devise a plan. The goal was to lure John Dawson out of hiding and into a situation where he could be apprehended. The plan needed to be both enticing and risky, capitalizing on Dawson's psychological profile and his compulsion to continue his manipulative games. During these meetings, Sarah's team discussed various scenarios and potential bait that could attract Dawson's attention. They considered staging a high-profile event or creating a situation that would pique his curiosity and drive him to make a move. The discussions were intense and focused, with every detail scrutinized to ensure the plan's success. One of the key elements of the plan involved setting up a decoy operation. Sarah and her team decided to create a scenario that would simulate a potential new crime scene. The idea was to use this fake scene as bait to lure Dawson into making contact. The decoy operation would involve a carefully staged environment, complete with fake evidence and plausible details to make it appear genuine. To enhance the effectiveness of the trap, Sarah decided to use a combination of real and fake information. They would leak certain details to the media, making the decoy operation appear more credible. The aim was to generate enough public and media attention to attract Dawson's interest, while ensuring that the true nature of the trap remained concealed. The team worked tirelessly to set up the decoy operation. They meticulously crafted the crime scene, complete with realistic elements that would mimic the conditions of Dawson's previous crimes. The operation involved collaboration with forensic experts, media specialists, and law enforcement personnel to ensure that every aspect of the trap was convincing. As the trap took shape, Sarah found herself grappling with the emotional and psychological weight of the operation. The idea of baiting Dawson into a confrontation was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. The stakes were high, and the risk of failure was significant. Sarah's determination to see justice served was tempered by a deep sense of responsibility and caution. The day of the decoy operation arrived, and the scene was set. Media reports about a new crime scene spread quickly, generating buzz and speculation. The staged environment, complete with fake evidence and attention-grabbing details, was designed to attract Dawson's attention. Law enforcement personnel were strategically positioned to monitor the situation and respond quickly if Dawson made a move. As Sarah and her team waited for Dawson to take the bait, the tension was palpable. The operation was a high-stakes gamble, and the outcome was uncertain. Every moment brought a mix of anticipation and anxiety as they monitored the decoy scene for any signs of Dawson's involvement. Hours passed, and the team remained vigilant. The media coverage and public interest continued to grow, but there was no immediate sign of Dawson's presence. The lack of activity was both a relief and a source of frustration. Sarah's team was prepared for the possibility that Dawson might not take the bait, but the hope of a successful capture remained. In a dramatic turn of events, Sarah received a tip from an informant who claimed to have seen Dawson in the vicinity of the decoy scene. The information was verified, and the team mobilized quickly to track down the lead. The operation shifted from a carefully staged trap to an active pursuit. The chase led Sarah and her team through a series of intense and dangerous encounters. Dawson's ability to evade capture was evident as he used his knowledge of law enforcement tactics to stay one step ahead. The pursuit was fraught with obstacles, and the team had to navigate a series of false leads and evasive maneuvers. Despite the challenges, Sarah's determination remained resolute. The pursuit of Dawson had become a personal mission, driven by a deep sense of responsibility and justice. The operation required quick thinking, coordination, and adaptability as the team worked to bring Dawson to justice. As the chase reached its climax, Sarah and her team finally cornered Dawson in a dramatic confrontation. The capture was tense and charged with emotion, but the meticulous planning and strategic execution of the trap had paid off. Dawson was apprehended, and the immediate danger was neutralized. The successful capture of John Dawson marked a significant achievement for Sarah and her team. The trap had been set with precision, and the execution of the plan had led to the apprehension of a dangerous fugitive. The operation was a testament to the dedication and skill of law enforcement in the pursuit of justice. In the aftermath of the capture, Sarah reflected on the complexities of the operation and the emotional toll it had taken. The process of setting the trap, the intense pursuit, and the ultimate confrontation had been a demanding and challenging experience. Despite the difficulties, Sarah's commitment to justice and her perseverance had resulted in a significant victory. The capture of John Dawson brought a sense of closure to the case, but the journey was far from over. The legal proceedings and the aftermath of Dawson's capture would continue to unfold, and Sarah remained dedicated to seeing the case through to its resolution. The trap had been set, and the pursuit of justice had been achieved, but the echoes of the case would continue to shape Sarah's path forward. Chapter 16: The Face of Evil. The apprehension of John Dawson marked a pivotal moment in the case. For Sarah Mitchell, it was a culmination of months of tireless work and emotional strain, but it also signaled the beginning of a new, intense phase. The confrontation with Dawson had always been a looming challenge, and now it was time for the showdown that would reveal the full extent of the darkness he harbored. The face-to-face encounter with Dawson was set to take place at a secure facility where he was being held under tight surveillance. The location was a high-security interrogation room designed to ensure that the meeting would be closely monitored and controlled. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension as Sarah prepared for the confrontation. Sarah had been briefed extensively on Dawson's psychological profile and his manipulative tendencies. His ability to remain calm and composed in the face of intense scrutiny had made him a particularly dangerous adversary. The interrogation was not just about extracting information. It was a psychological battle that required careful navigation of Dawson's cunning and charisma. Entering the interrogation room, Sarah faced John Dawson for the first time since his capture. He was seated at a metal table, his hands shackled, but his demeanor was eerily composed. His piercing eyes seemed to analyze Sarah with a cold, calculating gaze. The room was stark, with a single light casting harsh shadows, enhancing the tension of the encounter. "Mr. Dawson," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the tension. "We need to talk." Dawson's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. "Detective Mitchell, I was wondering when you'd come to see me. You're quite the persistent one." Sarah took a seat across from him, maintaining eye contact. "You've been evading justice for a long time. Now we're going to address that." Dawson leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed. "Ah, the classic line. You must be tired of playing this game. But you see, I find it quite fascinating." The exchange was as much psychological as it was procedural. Dawson's calm demeanor was designed to unsettle, a tactic he had perfected over years of manipulation. Sarah's objective was not just to interrogate, but to get Dawson to reveal his motivations, his methods, and more importantly, his true nature. "You've caused a lot of pain and suffering," Sarah said, leaning forward slightly. "You've taken lives and left scars that won't heal. Why?" Dawson's eyes glittered with a twisted satisfaction. "You see, detective, it's not just about the pain. It's about understanding the human mind. I was merely exploring its depths." His response was a chilling reminder of his detachment from human suffering. Dawson saw his actions as experiments, a way to delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche. For Sarah, this was a moment of profound realization about the nature of evil she was confronting. "The people you've hurt," Sarah continued, "they were real lives, not just experiments. What you did has consequences far beyond your twisted curiosity." Dawson's expression remained unchanged. "And yet, it's the consequences that interest me the most. The reactions, the fear, the chaos. It all provides valuable insights." The conversation continued, with Sarah probing deeper into Dawson's psyche. She tried to understand the motivations behind his crimes and his perspective on the world. Dawson's responses were calculated, revealing glimpses of his disturbed worldview but remaining frustratingly evasive about his deeper motivations. As the interrogation progressed, Sarah's resolve was tested. Dawson's manipulative tactics were designed to destabilize and provoke. He used his knowledge of psychological tactics to try and unsettle Sarah, turning the tables in an attempt to gain control of the conversation. Despite the psychological warfare, Sarah remained focused. She used her expertise and experience to navigate the conversation, steering it towards the critical information needed for the case. The interrogation was a battle of wits, with Sarah determined to uncover the truth behind Dawson's actions. The room was filled with a tense silence as Sarah carefully considered her next questions. Dawson's behavior and responses were studied meticulously, each word and gesture analyzed for insight into his disturbed mind. The goal was not only to gather evidence, but to gain a deeper understanding of the psychological patterns that drove his actions. At one point, Dawson leaned forward, his expression shifting to one of intense curiosity. "Tell me, detective, what drives you? What keeps you pursuing this case despite the personal toll?" Sarah met his gaze unwaveringly. "It's justice for the victims. It's about holding you accountable for the harm you've caused." Dawson's smile widened, a mixture of admiration and mockery in his eyes. "Ah, justice. Such an abstract concept, but I suppose it provides a sense of purpose for those who seek it." The exchange was a revealing glimpse into Dawson's mindset. His philosophical musings about justice and purpose underscored his detachment from reality and his twisted justification for his actions. It was a disturbing reminder of the chasm between his perception and the moral values upheld by society. As the interrogation drew to a close, Sarah felt a mix of relief and frustration. While she had gained valuable insights into Dawson's psyche, the encounter had also reinforced the depth of his depravity. The face of evil she had confronted was not just a physical presence, but a reflection of the darkest aspects of human nature. The information obtained during the interrogation would be crucial for the legal proceedings. Dawson's revelations, though disturbing, would provide valuable evidence in building a comprehensive case against him. The confrontation had been a critical step in the pursuit of justice, but it was only one part of a larger process. As Sarah left the interrogation room, she reflected on the emotional and psychological toll of the encounter. The experience had been intense and draining, but it had also strengthened her resolve to see the case through to its conclusion. The face of evil she had confronted was a reminder of the profound challenges and complexities inherent in her work. The chapter of the case involving John Dawson's confrontation was a significant moment in Sarah's journey. It had tested her resilience and determination, revealing both the darkness of Dawson's mind and the strength of her commitment to justice. The experience underscored the importance of confronting evil with courage and clarity, no matter how unsettling it may be. Chapter 17: The Aftermath. The days following John Dawson's apprehension were filled with a whirlwind of activity. The media frenzy surrounding his capture was unprecedented, with news outlets around the world reporting on the case. Dawson, once a shadowy figure lurking in the background of the city's psyche, was now thrust into the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. For Sarah Mitchell and her team, the focus had shifted from the hunt to managing the aftermath of the arrest. In the immediate aftermath, Sarah and her colleagues faced a barrage of questions and media inquiries. The press conferences were relentless, each reporter eager to get a scoop on the details of the case. Sarah, while maintaining her professionalism, found herself navigating a maze of media requests and public interest. The constant spotlight was both a testament to the significance of the case and a reminder of the personal toll it had taken on her. Inside the police department, the atmosphere was a mix of relief and exhaustion. Dawson's capture was a significant achievement, but it also meant that the team had to transition from the intense pursuit to the complex process of legal proceedings. The case was far from over, and the legal system would now play a crucial role in determining Dawson's fate. Sarah and her team worked closely with prosecutors to build a solid case against Dawson. The evidence collected during the investigation, including the insights gained from the interrogation, was meticulously reviewed and organized. The goal was to ensure that Dawson would be held accountable for his crimes and that justice would be served for the victims. The legal process was arduous and intricate. Dawson's defense team employed various strategies to challenge the evidence and cast doubt on the prosecution's case. The courtroom battles were intense, with both sides presenting compelling arguments and scrutinizing every detail of the investigation. Despite the challenges, Sarah remained focused and determined. The case was deeply personal for her, and she was committed to seeing it through to its conclusion. The courtroom became a battleground where the quest for justice played out in the public eye, and Sarah's role as a key witness and investigator was crucial to the prosecution's efforts. As the trial progressed, the impact of Dawson's crimes became even more evident. The victims' families and loved ones testified about the profound effects of Dawson's actions, providing a powerful and emotional perspective on the case. Their testimonies were a poignant reminder of the human cost of Dawson's crimes and the need for justice. For Sarah, the trial was a period of intense emotional reflection. The stories of the victims and their families underscored the gravity of the case and the profound consequences of Dawson's actions. It was a sobering reminder of the role of law enforcement in addressing the most egregious crimes and the importance of bringing perpetrators to justice. The courtroom drama was a spectacle of legal strategy and emotional testimony. Dawson's demeanor remained inscrutable, and his interactions with his defense team were marked by a sense of detachment. It was clear that he viewed the trial as another stage in his manipulative game, but Sarah and the prosecution remained resolute in their pursuit of justice. As the trial neared its conclusion, the tension reached a peak. The final arguments were delivered, and the jury deliberated on Dawson's guilt or innocence. The outcome was uncertain, and the stakes were high. Sarah and her team awaited the verdict with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The day the verdict was delivered was a momentous one. The courtroom was packed with reporters, victims' families, and legal professionals. The air was thick with tension as the judge read the jury's decision. The verdict was clear. John Dawson was found guilty on multiple counts of murder and other serious charges. The conviction was a moment of triumph for Sarah and her team. It was a vindication of their hard work and dedication, and a significant step towards delivering justice for the victims. The guilty verdict also provided a measure of closure for the victims' families, who had endured unimaginable suffering. However, the aftermath of the trial was not without its challenges. The case continued to attract media attention, and Dawson's sentencing became another focal point of public interest. The legal process was far from over, and the sentencing phase would determine the extent of Dawson's punishment. For Sarah, the conclusion of the trial marked a period of reflection and recovery. The emotional toll of the case had been significant, and the journey had been marked by moments of intense stress and fatigue. Despite the challenges, Sarah found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served and that Dawson would be held accountable for his crimes. In the weeks following the trial, Sarah took time to decompress and focus on her personal well-being. The case had been a defining experience in her career, and she needed to recharge before moving on to new challenges. The support of her colleagues, friends, and family was instrumental in helping her navigate the aftermath and find a sense of balance. As the public focus shifted away from the case, Sarah continued to work on other investigations and projects. The experience had left an indelible mark on her, and she remained committed to her role in law enforcement. The lessons learned from the case would shape her approach to future challenges, and the pursuit of justice remained a driving force in her career. The aftermath of John Dawson's capture and trial was a complex and multifaceted chapter in Sarah's journey. It was a period of intense legal battles, emotional reflection, and personal growth. The case had tested her resilience and dedication, but it had also reaffirmed her commitment to seeking justice and making a difference in the world. As Sarah moved forward, she carried with her the lessons and experiences gained from the case. The pursuit of justice was a continuous journey, and the impact of the case would resonate in her work for years to come. The face of evil she had confronted was a reminder of the darkness that could exist in the human mind, and her commitment to addressing that darkness remained steadfast. Chapter 18: The Shadows Within. The aftermath of John Dawson's trial left Sarah Mitchell with more than just the weight of the case's resolution. The experience had altered her in profound ways, leaving her grappling with the shadows that lingered long after the courtroom drama had ended. The intensity of the investigation, the psychological toll of confronting Dawson, and the harrowing testimonies of the victims had left indelible marks on her psyche. The days following the trial were a blur of media interviews, public appearances, and the slow process of returning to her normal routine. The victory in court was bittersweet, a moment of triumph overshadowed by the emotional aftermath of the case. For Sarah, the task of reconciling the horror of Dawson's crimes with the reality of her own life became a daily struggle. The sense of closure that the guilty verdict had provided was a fragile one. Dawson's capture and conviction had been a significant achievement, but the personal impact on Sarah was undeniable. The shadows of the case seemed to follow her, manifesting in recurring dreams and a lingering sense of unease. Sarah found herself haunted by the details of the case, the faces of the victims, and the chilling conversations with Dawson. The psychological scars were not easily healed, and she faced moments of intense introspection and emotional turbulence. The trauma of the case had become a part of her, a shadow that loomed over her everyday existence. The challenges of returning to work were compounded by the emotional toll of the case. The normalcy of her routine felt incongruous with the profound experiences she had endured. Her colleagues noticed the change in her demeanor, a subtle shift that spoke to the internal struggle she was facing. Sarah sought solace in therapy, a step she had initially resisted, but came to realize was essential for her well-being. The therapy sessions provided a space for her to process her emotions, confront her fears, and begin the journey of healing. It was a process of unraveling the psychological knots that had formed during the investigation and coming to terms with the shadows within. The sessions with her therapist were both challenging and cathartic. Sarah spoke candidly about the fears and anxieties that plagued her, the nightmares that replayed the darkest moments of the case, and the sense of vulnerability she felt. Through this process, she began to understand the depth of the psychological impact that the case had on her. As she navigated her recovery, Sarah found herself drawn to activities that provided a sense of normalcy and comfort. She reconnected with friends and family, sought out hobbies and interests that had been neglected during the intense period of the investigation, and took time to reflect on her personal goals and aspirations. The support of her loved ones was invaluable during this time. Their understanding and empathy helped Sarah to feel grounded and connected, even as she wrestled with the shadows that lingered from the case. Their presence provided a sense of stability and reassurance, a reminder that she was not alone in her journey. The impact of the case on Sarah's professional life was also significant. While she remained dedicated to her work, the experience had changed her perspective on law enforcement and justice. She approached her cases with a deeper understanding of the psychological dimensions of crime and a renewed commitment to supporting victims and their families. In her interactions with colleagues and the community, Sarah became a more empathetic and compassionate presence. The lessons learned from the Dawson case informed her approach to her work, and she sought to use her experiences to make a positive difference in the lives of others. As Sarah continued her recovery, she found solace in the idea that the shadows within her were not permanent. The healing process was ongoing, and she recognized that it was a journey with ups and downs. The shadows might never fully disappear, but they could be managed and understood, allowing her to move forward with a sense of purpose and resilience. The experience of confronting John Dawson had left Sarah with a profound understanding of the darkness that can exist within the human mind. It had also illuminated the strength and resilience that she possessed, qualities that would continue to guide her in her personal and professional life. The journey of healing was not just about overcoming the shadows of the past, but also about embracing the future with hope and determination. Sarah's commitment to her work and her personal growth were testaments to her strength and her ability to navigate the complexities of her experiences. As she moved forward, Sarah carried with her the lessons of the Dawson case, the support of her loved ones, and a renewed sense of purpose. The shadows within were a part of her story, but they were not the defining element. Her journey of recovery and resilience was a testament to her strength and her ability to confront and overcome the darkness. The chapter of John Dawson's case had concluded, but its impact would resonate in Sarah's life for years to come. The experience had shaped her in profound ways, and her commitment to justice and her own healing journey were reflections of her strength and determination. Chapter 19. The Legacy. With John Dawson's trial concluded and his fate sealed, the echoes of his actions continued to ripple through the community. The case had been a significant milestone in Sarah Mitchell's career, but its effects extended far beyond the courtroom. The legacy of Dawson's crimes and the investigation had left an indelible mark on those involved, shaping their lives and influencing their paths in unexpected ways. In the immediate aftermath of the trial, the media coverage shifted to the broader implications of the case. Articles, documentaries, and discussions explored the impact of Dawson's crimes on the victims, their families, and the community. The public's fascination with the case reflected a deep-seated need to understand the darkness that had been revealed and to seek answers to difficult questions. For Sarah, the legacy of the case was deeply personal. The experience had transformed her in ways she had not anticipated, and she found herself reflecting on the broader implications of her work. The case had highlighted the complex interplay between justice and personal trauma, and Sarah grappled with the responsibility of navigating these issues in her role as a law enforcement officer. The victims' families, too, were grappling with their own legacies. The trials and tribulations they had faced were far from over, and their lives had been forever altered by Dawson's actions. For many, the case had been a painful journey, but it had also become a catalyst for change. Some families chose to channel their grief into advocacy, working to raise awareness about issues related to crime and justice. Sarah was deeply moved by their resilience and courage. She found herself drawn to their stories and the ways in which they sought to create positive change in the aftermath of their suffering. Their determination to honor the memory of their loved ones by making a difference was a source of inspiration for Sarah. In her own life, Sarah sought to contribute to the legacy of the case by using her experiences to inform her work and her approach to justice. She became involved in initiatives aimed at supporting victims of crime and their families, using her insights and expertise to advocate for policies and practices that could make a difference in their lives. The case also had an impact on the police department and the broader law enforcement community. The investigation had been a monumental effort, showcasing the dedication and skill of the officers involved. The case served as a reminder of the challenges and complexities inherent in law enforcement work, and it prompted discussions about the need for ongoing support and training for officers facing similar cases. Sarah's colleagues recognized her contributions and the toll the case had taken on her. They supported her efforts to share her experiences and advocate for improvements within the department. The case had been a collective endeavor, and its legacy extended to the ways in which the team worked together to address the challenges and opportunities for growth. The community, too, was affected by the case. The revelation of Dawson's crimes had shaken the sense of security that many had taken for granted. In response, community leaders and organizations came together to promote discussions about safety, mental health, and support services. The case prompted a renewed focus on addressing the root causes of crime and providing resources for those affected by violence. As time passed, Sarah continued to reflect on the legacy of the case and its impact on her life. She remained committed to her work and her personal growth, recognizing that the experiences she had faced had shaped her in profound ways. The legacy of the case was not just about the resolution of a high-profile investigation. It was about the broader themes of justice, healing, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The legacy of John Dawson's case was multifaceted, encompassing the personal, professional, and community-wide responses to his crimes. It was a testament to the resilience of those affected and the ongoing efforts to create positive change in the face of adversity. For Sarah and others involved, the legacy was a reminder of the complexities of justice and the importance of navigating these challenges with empathy, dedication, and a commitment to making a difference. As Sarah continued her journey, she carried with her the lessons learned from the case and the knowledge that her work had contributed to a broader legacy of change and understanding. The impact of John Dawson's crimes had been profound, but it had also been a catalyst for growth, reflection, and a renewed commitment to justice and support for those affected by crime. The chapter of the case had concluded, but its legacy continued to shape the lives of those involved. The echoes of the past remained, but they were tempered by the hope and determination to create a better future. Sarah's journey was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit and the ongoing quest for justice and healing in the wake of darkness. Chapter 20. The Final Countdown. As the investigation into John Dawson's crimes reached its climax, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable sense of urgency. The city had been on edge for months, the pursuit of Dawson a relentless and high-stakes endeavor that had captivated and horrified the public alike. For Sarah Mitchell and her team, the final countdown was not just a matter of apprehending a fugitive. It was a battle against time, and a desperate push to end the reign of terror that Dawson had inflicted. The days leading up to the final confrontation were marked by intense preparations and strategic maneuvers. Sarah, having sifted through every piece of evidence and followed every lead, was acutely aware that this was their last chance to bring Dawson to justice. The task was fraught with risk. Dawson was a cunning adversary, his psychological profile indicating that he would not go down easily. The investigative team worked around the clock, piecing together the final clues that would lead them to Dawson's whereabouts. The pressure was immense, with each member of the team fully aware of the stakes involved. Sarah was determined to see the case through to the end, driven by both professional commitment and personal resolve. Dawson, now a fugitive, had become increasingly erratic. His behavior was marked by a mix of paranoia and defiance. As he felt the noose tightening, his desperation to evade capture led him to take more extreme measures. His movements became more erratic, and his actions more unpredictable. For Dawson, the thrill of the chase had morphed into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with high stakes for both sides. Sarah's team had identified a location that they believed could be Dawson's next hideout, a remote, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The location was consistent with Dawson's modus operandi, a place that offered isolation and secrecy. The warehouse, with its labyrinthine corridors and hidden corners, presented both an opportunity and a challenge. The final operation was meticulously planned. The team prepared for every possible scenario, including potential traps set by Dawson. Tactical units were deployed, and surveillance teams were positioned to cover all possible escape routes. The strategy was to corner Dawson, leaving him with no options for escape, and to ensure that the operation was executed with precision. The night of the operation was tense and fraught with anticipation. As the tactical units moved into position, Sarah took a moment to review the plan one last time. The weight of responsibility was heavy on her shoulders. The stakes were high, and the outcome was uncertain. She knew that any mistake could have dire consequences, not just for the team, but for the community they had vowed to protect. The raid on the warehouse began with a synchronized entry. The team moved through the darkened, echoing spaces with stealth and precision, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The warehouse's vast interior was filled with shadows and the echo of their footsteps, creating an eerie, suspenseful atmosphere. As they advanced, the tension mounted. Dawson's presence was felt but not yet seen, and the team had to navigate through the maze of crates and abandoned machinery with caution. Sarah's heart raced as they approached the central area of the warehouse, where they expected to find Dawson. The final confrontation came with a sudden burst of violence. Dawson, cornered and desperate, engaged in a fierce and chaotic struggle with the officers. The battle was intense, with gunfire and shouts reverberating through the warehouse. Sarah and her team had to act quickly and decisively to contain the situation and prevent any further harm. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah's focus was unwavering. She moved with purpose, her training and experience guiding her actions. As the confrontation reached its climax, Dawson's cunning and determination were matched by the resolve of the team. The struggle was a test of endurance and skill, with the outcome hanging in the balance. The resolution came with a dramatic and decisive moment. Dawson, cornered and overwhelmed, was finally subdued. The confrontation was over, but the emotional and physical toll was evident. Sarah and her team, though victorious, were left to grapple with the aftermath of the operation. In the wake of the final confrontation, the warehouse became a crime scene, and the team began the process of documenting and securing evidence. Dawson's arrest marked the end of a harrowing chapter, but it was also the beginning of a new phase in the case. The investigation had reached its conclusion, but the impact of the events would continue to reverberate. The final countdown had ended with Dawson's capture, but the legacy of the case remained. For Sarah and her team, the resolution of the case was a testament to their dedication and perseverance. The ordeal had been a profound and transformative experience, and its effects would be felt for years to come. As Sarah reflected on the events, she understood that the case had been more than just a pursuit of justice. It had been a journey through darkness and a test of human strength and resilience. The final chapter of John Dawson's story was closed, but its impact would continue to shape the lives of those involved. The resolution of the case brought a sense of closure, but also a reminder of the complexities and challenges inherent in the pursuit of justice. For Sarah and her team, the final countdown was a reflection of their commitment to protecting others and their ability to confront and overcome the darkest aspects of human nature. As the sun sets, casting eerie shadows over the city, John Dawson's dark reign of terror is far from over. Part 1 of Shadows of the Mind has taken us on a harrowing journey through Dawson's chilling descent into madness and Detective Sarah Mitchell's relentless pursuit. The stage is now set for a dramatic showdown as Dawson, cornered and desperate, makes his final stand in a forsaken factory. Sarah, with her sharp instincts and unyielding resolve, is closing in, ready to confront the darkness. But this is just the beginning. The true climax and resolution await in Part 2 of Shadows of the Mind, where the stakes are higher and the danger greater. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and join us for the continuation of this gripping tale.